also saying he's not the biggest political commentator is fucking crazy too? No, Asmongold 100% is the largest political commentator on this platform, which is interesting because that is precisely what people wanted. Not Asmongold personally. that wasn't Asmongold's wishes. I don't think he had a dream of being like the largest political commentator on the platform, but he did become it. It was, however, the wishes of many other people. Many other people, like I would say a lot of my naysayers on the liberal side. I won't even name them, but I'll name one of them, Sex Pestany, for example, in his community, consistently created allegiances and used every moment that they could to disparage figures that they considered to be the true threat to liberal values. People like myself. People who have not strayed away from being anti-fascist even a little bit. Now, having said that, the misconstruing the point that you're saying they wanted another dissenting voice in lieu of you just bringing up his name, this is not a What? No, they wanted a dissenting voice. They got it. What do you mean? Unless you meant, oh, they only want one dissenting voice, and that dissenting voice is a sex pest and a serial harasser of virtually every fucking content creator that dares to, hurt his feelings. Is that what you're saying? Because that is what they were. Yes, that's what they wanted. But in that process of disparagement, there's a lot of, there's a lot of charitability that was cast aside for someone like myself. And luckily for all of those naysayers, there is a dissenting voice now. This is the dissenting voice they got. Here's a person correctly talking about what the Nazis had done in terms of the first famous book burning that they engaged in, which was a library, a German library filled to the brim with medical research and data about trans people and queer people in general in Germany.
Remember that the Nazis burned the books that the Nazis burned books on gender sciences.
They did do that.
Correct. Asman is correct. Starts off good. Okay. Great. Good start. Okay. If the clip ends here, if it's a 12-second clip, you know what's really funny? If you clip Asmongold out of context, it sounds, normal and good. When you show additional context, it turns into the diametrical opposite, which is fun. Like from my ideological perspective, maybe not from others, but from where I'm standing, if someone had clipped this in the first 12 seconds, you're like, oh, good ending. Okay, great, cool. Which is ironic because my haters do that shit to me all the time, where they clip me out of context to make me assume positions that I don't have. And then when you watch the longer footage, you're like, oh, never mind. I actually totally got this wrong. So let's see what the rest of the context is, or what he continues to say after.
First, now the administration has villainized and marginalized migrant workers, trans.
It's a bit of a miss. Like, my understanding is that they burned them not because it was gender stuff, but because it was written in Jewish and not German.
This gets me every time. I'm sorry. Okay. Obviously, Jewish is not a language, and it certainly wasn't written in Hebrew, because that came after. I mean, Hebrew existed as a language, but wasn't as commonly used until after the Israeli state was designed. What he might mean is Yiddish, but even then, it's most likely not the case. Okay, most likely not the case that these books were written in Yiddish. Okay, which I guess is technically Jewish German when you really think about it. But also, that was the argument that the Nazis had maintained, which was that this research, whether it be for trans people, whether it be queer people, is un-German. So why do you keep saying it absolutely could have not been Hebrew? Because Hebrew was not a commonly used language until before 1948. Like, I mean, it was most German Jews spoke German and Yiddish. And also, yeah, it's not an academic language anyway. No academic would write a book in Yiddish. Also, Yiddish is just a dialect of German, so it's more like some specific words than an entire language. Exactly. I've talked about this before in terms of like the linguistic wonders of the nationalist project of Israel that revitalized the language of Hebrew. Hebrew was not a vernacular language at the time. It was mostly, yeah, it was almost wholly liturgical. This is a liturgical language. It's like revitalizing Latin, okay? And then making it the common, the common language. So at that time, it was simply liturgical. It was a religious scripture, religious text, and it was not a commonly applied normal. It didn't have normal colloquial usage. This is something that Israel actually did in terms of revitalizing Hebrew and making it the nation state's language after 1948. This is why I say there was no way that it was written in Hebrew. Now, of course, Asmongold doesn't know any of this, okay? We're not, like, I'm trying to offer you additional context, and Yiddish in and of itself is basically a German language with, some... Like it's not a language that would be used in academic settings as a written language. It was just a German sounding, like a variant of German almost, if that makes sense. Again, Asmongold said neither. He just said it's written in Jewish, which is one, wrong in and of itself, completely wrong. I'm also offering to you the additional context as to why it's wrong, giving you relevant historical data about the language of Hebrew and where it got to, and what kind of dialects that German Jews had used. Okay, Jewish is not a language; it is an ethno-religion. But also, last but not least, the Nazis were the ones who claimed that this was un-German, specifically little known guy by the name of Joseph Goebbels. So you don't have to apply their logic in the year 2025 when we already know that that was the wrong logic, right? The notion that like Jewish people are not German in 1934, 1935, 1938 was not correct. They were German. They were German Jews. Just like Jewish Americans are American Jews, and they're not a specific subsect of society. They're not like, out there as a alien formation, as a separate group. Okay? So that's just something important to address, even though I never thought that it would be necessary to address.
And it was like a retaking of Germany for Germans. That was like the uprising of the Nazis. So it was like, yeah, they were. I think it probably might be both in some circumstances, but like it was categorical for it not being written in German.
It was written in. Okay. The other part of this is that even if the books weren't written in the German language, which they were. But even if they weren't written in the German language, that would still be fucking insane to just burn these books. Okay? Just so we're clear. See, the benefit of learning about history is so that we, of course, in theory, don't repeat the mistakes of the past. That's number one. Number two, the second benefit of learning about history is that we don't have to assume the positions that the Nazi government took and take their marketing around the actions that they took for granted. We don't have to take it at face value, is what I'm saying. If Asmongold keeps putting out videos where he's, glazing Donald Trump and saying he's based, or watching videos about how immigrants are destroying the culture of Germany or destroying the culture of Poland, and Western superiority must be maintained. And he agrees with that and goes, yeah, this guy's got great ideas. Yeah, I agree with him. Yeah, inevitably, people are going to assume that you agree with them. Like you said, you are agreeing with Nazis. So, of course, people are going to think you're a fucking Nazi. So that's my point. Just like people say, Hasan, you agree with Hamas, right? Why do people say that? Is it born out of nothing? No, it's born out of the reality that I agree with Palestinian emancipation, okay? Hamas is but a name only in this process, okay? That's why people say, Hasan, you're pro-terrorist. You're pro-terrorist over and over and over again. There's also untrue aspects of their commentary, like when they say I'm anti-Semitic, or if they say that I agree with the internal dynamic or the political ideology of anything beyond just Palestinian emancipation. Okay? There's a reason why people say this sort of stuff. They say it because I'm anti-Israel and I'm pro-Palestinian. Okay? I know that. When talking about the terror watch list a few weeks ago, you said something along the lines of that even the IRA were on the terror watch list. Do you think the IRA aren't terrorists? You don't agree with... I'm confused. Like, when you say, do you think the IRA aren't terrorists, do you agree with Irish reunification or not? Like, do you agree with British colonial occupation of Ireland? What the fuck kind of position is this? Terrorism is a political designation that is kept vague deliberately so that the colonial power or the more powerful party can just deny habeas corpus and basic human rights to the people that they've declared a part of the bad group. You know? That's my point. That's a British chatter 100%. Irish republicanism is seen as still a terrorist ideology here because of the bombings in England and the sectarianism against prods. I'm going to be real. I support the IRA, but you can't pretend they weren't a terror organization. No, that's my point. Terrorism as a designation is a political one. That's the whole point, okay? The ANC were considered terrorists. They were fighting against apartheid South Africa. The IRA were considered terrorists. They were fighting against British colonial occupation. That's the entire point, okay? That's the entire reason for why this designation exists. If terrorism is simply doing violence to a civilian population, which is like what I do agree with, like as far as the designation, I agree. I think that the vague designation does not ever actually feature state violence, which it should. But I think at its base, if you want to consider something terrorism, you should consider it doing violence to a majority civilian population with the deliberate effort of making political change. If that is something that you consider terrorism, right? If that's what you consider terrorism, and that's, I think, as closest to the truth as you can get with respect to what terrorism is, okay? Then the American government would be the arch terrorists of the planet. That's it. The reason why I consistently show you people, movements, groups that were considered terrorists by states, right? That we now understand, now that time has passed, is not actually, like, they weren't actually bad or wrong, and they had a moral position that was correct, is so you understand and interpret current instances of violence that are coming from non-state actors. Okay? That shit is food for people who feed on your content. You should talk about revolutionaries. I do. Yes. In the American Revolution, the founding fathers were considered terrorists by the British Empire. In Vietnam, the Viet Cong were considered terrorists as the American military was dumping napalm on Vietnamese villages. Okay? So that's it. Here, I'll end it on this note, this beautiful note that I think many even reactionaries agree with. Here. Okay.
For us, smug, greedy, well-fed white people have invented a language to conceal their sins. It's as simple as that. The CIA doesn't kill anybody anymore. They neutralize people. Or they depopulate the area. The government doesn't lie. It engages in disinformation. The Pentagon actually measures nuclear radiation in something they call sunshine units. Israeli murderers are called commandos. Arab commandos are called terrorists. Contra killers are called freedom fighters. Well, if crime fighters fight crime and firefighters fight fire, what do freedom fighters fight?
Yeah. That's it. Asmus chat thinks Carlin is right wing and love him. Yeah, that's why I showed George Carlin. A lot of right wing people think, you know, a lot of right wing people think George Carlin is right wing. Yeah. Palestinian hostages are called prisoners. Israeli hostages are called hostages. This designation still exists. PFT was shitting on Trump's Gaza plan. Yeah, I
plan
saw
for
this.
Gaza that he's got going on.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Build a Trump property.
I'm gonna pee real quick
in Gaza.
This is a great
turn
video.
It into the Riviera of the Mediterranean. I've heard a lot of ideas in my day. I'm a good listener. What can I say? I hear a lot of people with a lot of ideas. I try to listen to all of them. It might be the worst idea I've ever heard in my entire life. I don't think that's an overstatement either. I feel like if we just take over Gaza and we build resort properties there, I don't see a way that doesn't end in nuclear war.
I don't understand why we even would want to do that.
Because it's real estate. And
yeah,
and he's a fan of real estate. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of real estate too. Love land. They're not making more of it. Get in while you can. Just taking over the Gaza Strip, bad idea. Probably the worst idea in the history of ideas, I would say.
I don't think it's the worst idea, but I don't like it.
I would say this is probably the worst that I've heard.
Okay.
I don't see a way that this happens without some sort of nuclear exchange. It's not America first at all. That's like America last.
Agreed.
It is endorsing ethnic cleansing. Like literally that's what it's doing. So bad idea. And then building an American property there and just taking over, being like, fuck you. If you want people to get attacked on a daily basis, then I would say go ahead and build a property in the Gaza Strip and have it be controlled by America. That's a good way to do it.
I saw him say, like, we won't even have to pay for it. They'll just give it to us or something.
I think he's just riffing.
I think so,
I
too.
don't know that anybody in the White House was ready for him to say that. I don't know that Netanyahu was ready for him to say that. But
he definitely wasn't. Netanyahu was like, "Hey, yo, fam, that's my. I got plans for that shit."
Yeah, that's our deal that we're doing right now. But Netanyahu, you can say what you want about him. The man is he's a skilled improver, and the one rule of improv is you say yes and you just roll with whatever the other person's riffing on. So when Trump was like, yeah, we'll put a Trump property there. It'll be ours. It'll be America. We'll take care of it. Yeah, Netanyahu was like, yeah, okay, yeah, that sounds good. Keep going. But yeah, he's just riffing. I don't know. I mean, but a lot of times his riffs turn into actual things. So
You're so fucking dumb. You're trying to say that the IR were only called terrorists because our government, yet they bomb my country over and over again, killing innocent people going to work, killed police doing their job, terrorist plain and simple, moronic terrorist sympathizer. It's free real estate. It's not the worst idea, though. Relax with the emotional takes. I love that this guy in literally the same minute, okay, went Donald Trump purchasing bombed out Gazan land and engaging in mass ethnic displacement, which is genocide, is good and based, and then turned around and said the IRA is a massive terrorist organization because they fucking killed cops. Okay? Oh, this is the guy who said, never mind. My bad. Why the fuck are you saying it's free real estate? Who cares about Trump? You tried to say the IRA isn't a terrorist organization. Bombing pubs in England is terrorism. No, I said that the designation for a terror organization is absolutely suitable for organizations that overwhelmingly target civilian populations. If you're talking about cops, that is not a part of the civilian population. Whether you agree to it or not doesn't matter. Cops in that regard, police in that regard, I'm not saying I agree with this, but police and military is enemy combatants. They're armed combatants, okay? Cops aren't military. I know cops aren't military, but cops still, in this regard, would be considered armed combatants. This is not even my designation, by the way. This is literally just like the official designation of terrorism. Ultimately, and I can't believe now we're going back to the IRA, the standard of violence is still designed by the colonial occupiers. And what the British forces did in Ireland was far more violent than the IRA's retaliation for what is seen, now at least, as a just cause. So I will not stand down from my defense. Okay? That's it. Resisting against colonial violence is always going to be a violent and sometimes ugly affair. Okay? The easiest way to ensure that ugliness and violence does not occur is by simply not fucking occupying another country. It's that simple. And yet people never seem to understand this. British people don't seem to understand this because historically they were the occupiers, and American people certainly don't understand this because, again, same principle, historically occupiers. Everyone else around the world gets it. Everyone else, every other nation on this planet, for the most part, have a very different story. A story of overcoming great odds. A story of national liberators fighting long and hard against some semblance of colonial entity, some colonial occupation. Do you understand? With the exception of some nations that don't. Nations that were historically dominant. Okay? Even America has a version of this against the British Empire. So, hilariously, at least I can point to the fucking Revolutionary War for a second for Americans that kind of understand this dynamic.